sample video, we're going to be looking at review exercise 610. And in this one, we are going to be talking about what happens when a company actually sells their accounts receivable, meaning that they give them away. They no longer have the responsibility to collect the money on those accounts receivable, which is the case when they assign accounts receivable. When they're assigning accounts receivable, they still own the accounts receivable. They still have to collect the accounts receivable. When we factor or sell our accounts receivable, we are selling them off to somebody else, meaning we will not collect any cash on those receivables going forward. So, in review exercise 610, it tells us that on December 1st, Newton Enterprises sells $100,000 of accounts receivable to a factor without recourse. We receive 85% of the value of the factored accounts and are charged a 10% commission on the gross amount of the factored accounts receivable. It tells us that Newton normally factors its accounts receivable, and we need to prepare Newton's journal entries. There's a few things here that we need to look at. First, it tells us that Newton normally factors its accounts receivable, meaning this is not a temporary shortage that the companies are experiencing. This is something that they do frequently. So companies might do this if they are a smaller company, they don't really have anybody to do a lot of collections on their accounts receivable. When it says that it normally factors its accounts receivable, that 10% commission that we're being charged is going to be recorded as an expense. If they did not normally factor their accounts receivable, it was just a temporary situation that they needed immediate cash for, we would record the 10% commission as a loss for the company. The second thing that we need to look at is that they're telling us that the commission is charged on the gross amount of factored receivables. That's not always the case, so be sure you're paying attention to what the commission is being charged on. So now let's do our journal entry for December 1st. Again, we are factoring or selling our receivables in order to get cash for our company. So we are going to have cash. We are factoring or selling $100,000 of our receivables. They tell us that we're only going to receive 85% of that up front from that factor. And we also have to pay a 10% commission on the gross amount that we are factoring, and that gross amount is that full 100,000. So we take our 100,000 times the 85%, that's how much the factor is going to be giving us, but we also have to take away the 10% commission that we're being charged. So that means by selling 100,000 of our receivables, we're getting 75,000 in cash. Again, they told us that this is something that the company does frequently, so therefore it's an expense, that 10% commission. So we have a factoring expense, which again is the 100,000 times the 10% because it was done on gross amount that was factored. So we have a 10,000 factoring expense. We are actually selling these receivables and we're only getting 85% of that value, which means that technically the factor could get all $100,000 collected from our customers. So we actually have a receivable from factor that is owed to us. It's the 100,000 times the 15% that could be potentially owed to us. Again, the 15% is coming from the difference between 100% and the 85%. The receivable from factor will decrease if any merchandise is returned to us, or if somebody of our customers becomes a bad debt to that factor. And And since we're actually selling our accounts receivable, we can no longer have those receivables on our books. So we have to eliminate our accounts receivable for the $100,000.